Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Reserve Seating. This is week 3 of Post-Apocalypse Month, and we're joined by a very special guest, JB. And when I knew we were doing Post-Apocalypse Month, and I took a look at the Wikipedia page for post-apocalypse movies and saw Last Man on Earth, I knew that was going to be one of my choices, and I knew I had to ask JB to be on the show because he's like my favorite person to talk Vincent Price with, other than my mom, because my mom and I share a mutual love of Vincent Price. And Last Man on Earth is a movie we watch every year, every October. And there's Ben Affleck and there's Vincent Price, and I don't have anything John Travolta to hold up, so I feel at a loss. But yeah, we're talking about The Last Man on Earth from 1964. It is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the first adaptation of Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, which has since been adapted as The Omega Man starring Charlton Heston, and most recently I Am Legend but with Will Smith. But from everything I read, The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price is the most faithful to the source material.
It is.
Okay. So
we should start there. John, you've read the book?
I have not read the book. However, Trailers from Hell, Joe Dante points out that Matheson tried to have his name taken off the picture.
Right, because he did the screenplay.
Which makes no sense because, again, it's so much more faithful to the book than The Omega Man, which I hold in my heart because I watched it 100 times when I was a kid. And I don't know what you guys think, but the Will Smith version's unwatchable.
I haven't seen it probably since 2007 or 2008. At the time, I liked it, but my big gripe with it was the CGI just ruined everything for me. Because even at the time, it was kind of poor. But
Jan and I were imagining his representation saying, Will, how'd you like to be the only person in the whole movie? You and a dog to prove that you're a regular guy. How would you like to have that?
Yeah, I saw The Last Man on Earth for the first time at the venerable Portage Theater, which John knows very well, where the wrecking ball always looks like it's going to come through the wall anytime you sit down.
And that would be part of the post-apocalyptic vibe of watching Last Man on Earth.
Something
very appropriate about watching Last Man on Earth at the Portage.
It would. So the first time I saw it, it was during in October. It was a double feature with House on Haunted Hill. And in between was Victoria Price, Vincent Price's daughter, there. And she did, literally, it was like a slideshow of photos that were her personal photos of her and her father. And she told stories about just growing up with him and about movies that he starred in, and it was really interesting. And ever since then, I think Last Man on Earth has kind of held a special place in my heart from that memory. But as I've watched it almost every year in the past 15 years, I think it's my favorite Vincent Price movie.
And that's interesting that you brought up Victoria, because when I was watching it last night, because Vincent Price holds this place in my heart as this preternatural being, the whole time I'm watching Last Man on Earth, I kept thinking that the little girl belonged to his friend and that he was the uncle, because I was like, surely Vincent Price cannot have children. Vincent Price does not have regular gender like a human being.
Right, yeah.
And then I remembered that he does have a daughter for real named Victoria. Also, because I grew up with Vincent Price still alive and on the talk show circuit in the 70s.
Yeah.
Whenever he would handle the garlic in Last Man on Earth, I pictured him saying, "And now, Dinosaur, I'm going to show you a wonderful recipe that we can make with this garlic." Because he had a lot of he fancied himself a gourmet chef, and he wrote cookbooks, and very often on these talk shows he did a cooking segment. And also in the 70s, Sears, Roebuck and Company had a deal with Vincent Price where he would curate an art collection, that all this art that you could buy from Sears had been selected by Vincent Price because he was also something of an art collector.
I was watching this and definitely refamiliarizing myself with the beats of it and the energy of it and stuff like that. And I wanted to start, because you guys are such Price heads. Matheson in the brief Wikipedia research that I did noted that he felt that Price was miscast in this. And I'm curious about your thoughts on that, because maybe in his head he imagined more of a chisel jawed sort of matinee idol in the part.
wanted he wanted Harrison Ford. He later said that Harrison Ford was
Harrison
the
Ford,
ideal casting for the part. And I think
More of
that
an action hero.
right?
yeah, I think that he almost wanted like the guy who plays the uncle as like the square jaw kind of like
Exactly. Yeah.
Boy Scout.
Morgan,
And
Morgan.
yeah, maybe Vincent Price just kind of had too much Goldblum in him. Like it
I
was
think you
like,
need Price in this part. I think you need,
yeah,
there's an ambiguity, and as JB, as you were mentioning, a sort of otherworldly quality to him. There's a this makes no sense, but I was thinking of Michael Keaton in Batman, how there's that Keaton brings that sort of aloofness to that part, to Bruce Wayne in that movie, which I think is so interesting about the way he chose to interpret that. I think Price brings that to this part in a way that like a matinee idol wouldn't.
And there's something else Price brings that I was really struck by last night watching it again. And he was able to do this his whole career. At certain points in The Last Man on Earth, he has to spout scientific gibberish.
Yes.
It's nonsense.
Right.
It's fictional doggerel from someone who doesn't really understand science. And I went back to The Tingler, where he does the exact same thing. And was anyone ever better at committing to the bit
Yeah.
and making you believe that it was real, making you believe that it's real science? This is a doctor, and what this guy is talking about is actually happening, or the way that it works. He was a master at that.
Yeah.
I liked this time watching it, paying attention to, ostensibly he's the protagonist, he's the hero in quotes until we know more about him. Um, the guy at the end of the movie is a real petty dick, and there's a lot of reasons how he got to that point. But even like when we see the lead up of like, there's this airborne virus turning people into vampires and everything like that, and he dismisses it because he just wants to dismiss it. Like that's more or less what it is just his hubris. And at the end it's kind of bookended by like, I'm the last man. Like I reject what this new evolution
Right.
is.
Yeah.
Like you're inhuman and everything like that. And I think it's
Calls
so
them
interesting
freaks
because
and yeah.
Vincent Price has played dark characters his entire career, especially in horror, but like he's so ingratiating as a personality that like it's fun to see him play with that image.
I think it's really, really cool. I think this movie overall, when I like this story in general, and I really like the way that it's been interpreted in different ways. And I've not read the book either. And from what I've read of the summary and reviews and stuff, it's a lot more of that scientific gobbledygook that you talked about, Jamie, about sort of like, oh well, the vampires and do this, and but because of the bloodstreams. And I was thinking about the Omega Man, and John, you've seen the Omega Man more than I have, and Adam, you probably have too, because I've only seen it once or twice. Is the outcome the same in that one in terms of the end?
Almost exactly.
Almost exact,
Although
right?
it takes place outside. He's in a fountain, but no spoilers here. The actual literal fate of the Price character
Right.
is literally what happens to Heston. The Omega Man's a very strange film. It's one of those Universal films from the 70s with the flat lighting, and they're almost churning them out on a treadmill or something. When he's tooling about the city during the day, he finds his way into a theater, and we're meant to think that he does this a lot. And he runs Woodstock for himself.
Hmm.
And there's this wonderful wordless scene where he's just watching the screen that contains 500,000 or 600,000 people. And it's beautiful in a film that's really overstated. It's the one moment where the filmmakers sort of step back
Yeah.
and let you make up your mind. It's beautiful. It would be a better film if they had more moments like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like even though I know unanimously we're not fans of I Am Legend, I do like the detail that movie uses, similar to what you're saying, John, where his thing is every day he goes and picks a new DVD in alphabetical order to watch.
Yeah.
And I it's just like little details like that of like, this is how somebody passes the time. And the interesting thing with Vincent Price's character is the way he passes the time is like, if you have bugs in your home, and you're just like, well, I know they're here, and I'm gonna go on the offensive and just kill all of them and everything. That's how he passes his day. One thing I wanted to ask both of you is, I had always thought Night of the Living Dead, first movie of its kind, zombies wise. And this is very much, these are zombies, but they're called vampires.
Vampires, yeah.
And usually, like, that's not part of the Night of the Living Dead conversation, but I very briefly saw in IMDb that, like, George A. Romero, definitely didn't shy away from, like, Last Man on Earth being an inspiration in part on Night of the Living Dead. But what do you guys think of this, like, in terms of how it plays off of Night of the Living Dead? Like, if you were going to do like a thematic double feature, do you think these two would work together?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're both. I mean, sort of, they both come to similar conclusions about humanity. You know what I mean? I think generally,
Very much, very much.
You know what I mean? Like, I think they both maybe they get there in different ways, but yeah, no, I could definitely see that. John, what do you think?
I don't see how you can watch Last Man on Earth and not see how much Night of the Living Dead was influenced by it.
Yeah.
Not just story or story structure, but also the look of the film, some specific shots and beats, the use of the child. I kept waiting for Vincent Price's daughter to say "I hurt," which of course is the only line that the little girl gets in Night of the Living Dead. I mean, it's very clear that Romero and company saw it, even down to aspects of the ending.
I like the idea that this movie is, because it's an AIP movie and it's got some of those, like I was thinking of like Godzilla, like those 50s sci-fi movies where like part of the movie can be the thing, but then part of it's got to be people talking in a lab. Like it's got to be people standing on sets talking in a lab. You know what I mean? That kind of, and this movie dips its toes into that to sort of steady itself in the second act, where it's like, let's go back and look at the look. Oh, surely there must be a formula. It's like, no, you believe the vaccine's doing it, like all the debates and stuff like that, because that's kind of what science fiction films were at that time. But then this movie really does dip its toes the other way then into, like, you can tell its intentions are a little bit gnarlier. They're a little bit more like punk rock,
much gnarlier.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
I always thought the lab stuff, which is in all these movies, is there because it's cheap.
Right, exactly.
It's not an expensive set.
You can afford
people in a room talking.
You're going to spend your money on a couple shots of the monsters, and then everything else has got to be two guys on a set.
But the gnarly stuff you're talking about in his Trailers from Hell commentary, Dante also points out that they originally offered the film to Hammer, and Hammer said this will never pass the censors in England. And so I'm watching it last night with that in mind. And there's some rough stuff in this film. And I'm specifically talking about the scenes involving the pit, where the soundtrack to Night of the Living Dead is playing in my head, and I'm hearing the bereaved will have to forego the dubious comforts of a funeral service provides. Drag them to the street and burn them. They're just dead flesh and dangerous. And for the time that we're talking about, that is very cutting edge.
Like, one of the things, like you had mentioned, like the cynicism of the ending, like one of the things I find so interesting, and it's not like great, groundbreaking dialogue. It's a fairly obvious beat. The movie ends with the woman who's kind of half and half, who can manage her vampirism. She's walking out and the baby's crying, and she's just like, no, we're gonna be fine now. And it's like, you start the movie where it's like, we need to get rid of the vampires and then we'll be fine. And it's like, at the end, it's the vampires are just like, he was the big problem. We can move on now.
And also to kind of connect this back to my original intention with this month themes, which is The Last of Us. Not to spoil, I'm not spoiling the story for anybody, but that's what The Last of Us is. The Last of Us is called that because it's, does humanity deserve to be restarted? Okay, so we're in this place where we destroyed everything. Now there's a couple people and there's this hope for humanity. There's this little bit of hope. Okay, but then it's, well, I don't know. Should we go back to that? Does humanity deserve a second chance? And that's kind of similar along the lines of this, which is like, oh, I'm the last human being. Well, are you? Like, are you so great? I love that ambiguity.
Going back to what Adam said, It's almost like when we get to the end of The Last Man on Earth, it's a variation on my favorite line in the history of the television show The Simpsons. There's an episode where an asteroid is going to hit Springfield, and something happens at the end, and it bounces off harmlessly, and they're all saved. And the last line of the episode is Mo the bartender saying, "Now let's go burn down the observatory so this never happens again." So they've dispatched Vincent Price. All is well.
All is well.
All is well.
Any movie I take from the Vincent Price Scream Factory collection and put in, the moment I hear the music playing over the main menu, I'm home. It's like that warm fireplace feeling. It's just so great.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
And the Kino Lorber disc of The Last Man on Earth, which is the one I watched, is very beautiful because there was a time when this was a public domain eyesore, and the version they would show on UHF TV was washed out and scratchy and well nigh unwatchable, but it looks very nice now.
All right, so my question for you gentlemen here, it's about time to remake this film. It's about time. Who plays the Vincent Price character today in the 2023-2024 remake of The Last Man on Earth? Who is the modern equivalent? Who's the character actor that can, or genre actor that can pull it off?
I don't think you can do well, I won't say you can't. I don't think you should do a man. I think like the only way to make this fresh is to have a woman be the lead. And I can't think of who specifically, because I think that the key thing is you need somebody, and I'm not saying that there isn't anybody, I just can't think of somebody. You need somebody who can do the Tom Hanks and Castaway, who can hold a movie by themselves for 90% of it. And I don't know. Like, I think also you might need somebody who's kind of been away for a while. Like, I don't know. I'm not saying this is the right answer, but for some reason in my head right now, I'm just like, wouldn't you really be curious about like Winona Ryder is the last woman on Earth or something like that? And it's just like somebody who's kind of quirky, and you can't picture the movie in your head just by like naming the name of it, of the actor. So I don't know. John, did you have a
The more I think about this, Adam, the more I'm liking it, because for the first half in the lab, we get the horror of mansplaining, where all the men are convincing her that she's wrong, but she's right. And then in the second half, the vampire stuff becomes an allegory for sexual harassment. And so the whole thing is a bundle of subtext. Off the top of my head, I would like to see another remake of The Last Man on Earth with Jake Gyllenhaal.
I can see that.
Okay.
See that? Absolutely.
Because I'm always surprised by what he brings. And even though you could argue, well, no, I don't think anyone would argue that he's enough of a movie star where it's similar enough in every movie, but I don't find him to be the same in every movie.
No,
Plus,
he's a character actor.
I think he passes the test that he can hold our attention for an entire movie by himself. Obviously, if any of our listeners or viewers have not seen it, I mean, you need to. It's become canon. It's become this seminal film that you have to see if you're interested in the history of horror films.
We will be back wrapping up Post-Apocalypse Month next week with Never Let Me Go with I'm going to try to remember the cast. Carey Mulligan, Andrew Garfield, Keira Knightley?
I think so.
Okay. Well, thank you, John, for being with us. This was great as always. And
I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, for having me on. Now I'm going to make you some exquisite eggs, because as you know, I played Egghead on the old Batman TV series.
I think that Vincent Price should do the wrap up of Until Next Time These Seats Are Reserved. So do you think Vincent would be up for that?
Until next time, these seats are reserved.